They left him at the edge of the ravine like a broken tool, one leg twisted beneath him, the dust already settling on his clothes, as if the earth itself had begun to claim him. The sun burned high and merciless, and the flies had started their slow, patient circling. He did not cry out anymore. His voice had been used up hours ago, along with his strength, his hope, and almost his will to live. In the wild silence of the plains, where even suffering often went unseen, this was how men disappeared, quietly, forgotten, as if they had never mattered at all. Before the story goes any further, let me ask you something. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the idea that one good heart can change a life forever, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel Wild West Tale. Stories like this exist because people like you still believe humanity matters. The man they left behind had once been strong. His hands, now trembling and scraped raw against the rocks, had built fences, guided cattle, and lifted children onto horses. But an accident had changed everything. A fall from a spooked horse shattered his leg in a way that never healed right. From that day on, he walked with pain, slow and uneven, dragging one foot just enough for others to notice. In a world that valued speed, strength, and endurance, he became a burden. Work dried up. Smiles turned into sighs. Offers turned into excuses. And when the group he traveled with decided they could no longer afford to wait for him, they chose the simplest solution. They helped him off the wagon, gave him a small canteen already half empty, and told him they would send help. Then they left. The sound of the wheels faded. No help ever came. Hours passed, then more. The sun shifted, shadows crawled, and the heat baked the ground until it felt like fire beneath his body. He tried to move, dragging himself inch by inch, but the pain stole his breath and left him dizzy. He thought of his mother, long buried, who used to say that a man's worth was not measured by his strength but by his heart. He wondered if she had been wrong, because the world had certainly decided he was no longer worth carrying. As the day wore on, his thoughts grew slower, heavier, like stones sinking into water. Death no longer felt dramatic. It felt quiet, almost gentle, like falling asleep. That was when the shadow appeared. At first he thought it was a trick of the sun, another cruel illusion before the end. But the shadow moved with purpose, long and steady, stretching across the ground until it covered his face. The sound followed next, soft hoofbeats, unhurried. The sound of a horse accustomed to long days and longer miles. When he forced his eyes open, squinting against the light, he saw a man sitting tall in the saddle. Dust coated the cowboy's coat, and the brim of his hat cast his face in shade. But there was nothing hurried or afraid in the way he sat. He looked like a man who had seen the worst of the land and survived it. The cowboy reined in his horse and took in the scene without a word. He saw the twisted leg, the dried blood, the empty horizon where a wagon should have been. He saw the truth of it as clearly as if it had been written in the dirt. Someone had decided this man was not worth saving. The cowboy dismounted slowly. He did not curse. He did not ask foolish questions. He knelt beside the broken man and checked his pulse, steady but weak. He gave him water, not too much, just enough to bring him back from the edge. The water tasted like life itself. When the injured man tried to speak, the cowboy raised a hand, not to silence him but to calm him, as if to say there would be time for words later. The cowboy had his own reasons for being alone out there. He was a man who had lost more than most and learned to carry it quietly. Years earlier, greed and cruelty had taken his family and his land, leaving him with nothing but a horse, a rifle, and a promise to himself that he would not become like the men who had wronged him. He traveled where the wind took him, working when he could, helping when he felt it mattered, and standing there, looking down at a man left to die simply because he could not keep up. He felt that old promise stir again. It took hours to get the injured man onto the horse without causing more harm. The cowboy tore strips from his own shirt to bind the leg, using skills learned the hard way. He walked beside the horse instead of riding, steadying the injured man, murmuring reassurances that meant more than any medicine. Every step was slow. Every mile felt longer than the last. But the cowboy did not turn back. He did not complain. The land watched them pass, indifferent but vast, as if testing whether kindness still had a place in such a hard world. They reached an abandoned cabin just as the sky began to darken. It was little more than a shack, leaning and weather-beaten, but it had walls and a roof, and that was enough. The cowboy made a fire, cleaned the wounds, and stayed awake through the night, listening to the injured man's breathing, ready in case it faltered, in the flickering firelight. The broken man slept deeper than he had in days, his face finally free of fear. The days that followed were not easy. Fever came and went. Pain lingered. The injured man's leg would never be the same, and both of them knew it. But something else began to heal as well, something harder to name. The cowboy talked as he worked, not with grand speeches, but with simple stories about the land, about people he had met, about mistakes he had made. He treated the injured man not as a burden, but as a companion, someone whose life still held value. That alone did more than any bandage ever could. As the injured man grew stronger, he noticed something strange about the cabin. Beneath the layers of dust and neglect, there were signs that someone had once lived there with care. Carved marks on the doorframe, a stone hearth built with skill. One afternoon, while the cowboy was out checking traps, the injured man dragged himself across the floor and noticed a loose board near the back wall. It was nothing at first glance, but something about it felt deliberate. When he pried it up, his breath caught. Beneath the floor was a small hidden space. Inside it lay a leather-wrapped bundle, stiff with age but carefully sealed. When the cowboy returned and they opened it together, they found gold coins, old and heavy, along with papers yellowed by time. The papers told a story of their own. The cabin had belonged to a prospector who had struck it rich, but never lived to spend it. Afraid of thieves, he had hidden his fortune and written down its location, intending to return. He never did. The cowboy sat back, stunned. He had spent years scraping by, never expecting anything from the world. And now, by stopping for a man everyone else had abandoned, he had stumbled upon a fortune. But what struck him most was not the gold. It was the timing. If he had not stopped, if he had looked away, if he had decided, like the others, that the injured man was not worth the trouble, none of this would have happened. The gold changed their lives, but not in the way stories usually tell it. The cowboy did not ride into town flashing coins or buying respect. He used the money carefully. He bought land, good land, and built a place where people, who had been cast aside, could work and live with dignity. The injured man, whose leg never fully healed, became the heart of the place. He managed accounts, fixed tools, and welcomed newcomers, with a quiet understanding that only someone who had been left behind could truly offer. Word spread slowly, carried by travelers and chance encounters, a place where no one was thrown away, a place where effort mattered more than perfection. The cowboy watched it grow with a kind of pride he had never known before. He had lost so much in his life, but by choosing kindness when it mattered most, he had found something greater than revenge or survival. He had found purpose. Years passed. The land changed. The world moved on. But the story remained. People would ask how it all began, expecting a tale of luck or cleverness. The cowboy would simply say that it began with a man left to die, and a choice to stop and care. He never spoke of the gold as the miracle. To him, the real treasure had been found long before they lifted that loose floorboard. As you reach this moment in the story, if it has touched your heart in any way, please take a second to like this video, share it, and let us know in the comments. Your support keeps stories like this alive, stories that remind us who we can be when we choose compassion. The injured man lived out his days surrounded by people who valued him, who listened when he spoke, who never once saw him as less. And when he finally passed, peacefully, the cowboy stood by his grave. With his hat in his hands, grateful not just for the life they had built, but for the moment years ago when he had listened to his conscience instead of the road. Before the ending fades, I want to ask you one more special thing. Please comment below and tell us what part of this story moved you the most, or share a moment when kindness changed your life. Your words matter more than you know, because in a world that often leaves the broken behind, every act of mercy is a quiet rebellion. And sometimes, when you choose to stop, to care, to see value where others see waste, you don't just save a life, you uncover a treasure far greater than gold.